Lawyers, come out and play. They didn't want me for the Warriors. I also wasn't born yet. I'm John Stark from MacMovieGuy.com, your favorite blind film critic, and this is the 45th anniversary of The Warriors. Warriors released in 1979, so it turned 45 in 2024. It's available with audio description. So, I have one question for you. Can you dig it? Oh, it's directed by Walter Hill. Has a cast of mostly people who didn't go on to do like a whole lot of things. Especially nowadays, like trying to trying to talk to people and be like, I'd be like, "Do you know James Remar?" I mean, I don't mind talking to people about James Remar, but I kind of imagine myself talking to like Gen Alpha about James Remar and them being like, "Who? From what movie? Oh, I think my dad likes that movie." I'm like, "Oh my god." So yeah, this movie predates me, um, and it feels like it too. It's very counterculture. It's an incendiary movie. It's like one of the most dangerous movies ever made because it's one of those movies that cause like actual violence. Like there were actual incidents. Sort of like with what Blue Story over in the UK when that dropped, people were like, "Oh my god, oh my god." And this shit is real. Like I worked at a movie theater, and we had notably on like less movies. Um, I definitely remember they were worried about 8 Mile. It never ends up being though always the movies that you expect. Like we had a ride in Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the remake, the Michael Bay remake with Jessica Biel. Like that was the thing that had the most. 8 Mile kind of had a thing when that came out. Um, Theaters started like getting security for movies. We had when we were in theaters, we had like heavy police presence when Get Rich or Die Trying opened. Like I don't know what they thought was gonna happen, but we were ready for whatever. Like for whatever. Anyway, um, so yeah, but I guess theaters were not ready for the Warriors. It was originally rated X. So if you decide to dive in on the Warriors, remember that you're watching an X-rated movie. So maybe it's not safe for work. I don't know, but you're definitely fighting back. You're watching something that's very. Um, yeah, this has. I would say this has a lasting cultural impact. Uh, sure. I mean, it's got quotable lines throughout the whole movie. If you've ever heard people do those lines before, you're like, that's the movie that it comes from. You know? Like, can you dig it? You're like, oh my god, that's the Warriors? What? It's sort of like as a kid I grew up with I'm yes, I was a kid once. And this is you have to remember like age and when movies came out. Um, and Duke Nukem had that line in his video game, "I'm here to kick ass and chew bubblegum and I'm all out of gum," which I thought was exclusive to Duke Nukem because at the time I was a kid and I hadn't seen a movie in which it was referring. I have, obviously, but uh, that's what I'm talking about. Is like sometimes these things they end up sort of perforating into other things, into video games and stuff like that, and they come from somewhere. They didn't actually originate in the thing in which you think they originated. So Walter Hill shot this in New York City. It's set in sort of like a for 1979 in sort of like a slightly futuristic version of this, but not like Blade Runner. Uh, it's a little bit more dystopian. There's a gang leader, Cyrus, at the beginning of the movie, who has called all of the gangs in the city together to uh he wants to have a truce because he has calculated that there are enough gang members if all the gangs come together that they can overtake the police and run New York City. So it would become like a gangland. New York City. Sort of every Giuliani's worst nightmare. Um, so yeah, I mean, in 1979, I'm sure people were thinking about this. I'm sure it looks great, for 1979. Some of the shoots are really complicated, lots of crowd shots. They use actual gang members in crowd shots and stuff like that. Originally, Cyrus was supposed to be a gang member, um, but at the last minute didn't end up showing up, even though he had rehearsed the scene, and they had to get an actor at the last minute. So when you think about that "Can you dig it" line, that dude had, like, he learned that the day of, basically. They had to hire somebody the day of shoot because the actual gang member didn't show up. So they had to replace him with this guy. Um, and I think that's, I mean, incredibly subversive when you think about the way that they were shooting this. It's like you were going to use actual gang members in a movie of 1979, and they did in the crowd shots. They're still gang members. Um, so to help fill out these, because you got these big sequences, and yeah, I wonder if they had to call a truce because like they wanted to, be in the movie. Sort of like could the Bloods and the Crips, you know what I'm saying? Like they're like, oh yeah, we gotta get up in the crowd shot and this is gonna be epic. So we got a truce for just today for the filming of this movie. We both talked to Walter Hill. We had a negotiation. There's a truce. Meanwhile, the regular actors are back there going like, all right, I really hope nothing happens. Like, but it's it's a film that, you know, I think people didn't want other people to see. It's a film that sort of that Rage Against the Machine feel, fight against the system, the man, uh, stand up, but also just violence. You know what I'm saying? Like just the level of violence for 1979 is a little bit above what a lot of people were used to at the time. So yeah, I mean, people react to movies in theaters all the time. Uh, if you worked in a movie theater in, was it 2001? Uh, you might have heard your parking lot after Fast and Furious. At least for me, like every time Fast and Furious got out, it was always like everybody thought they were living the movie. And I'm sure by the time they got out of the parking lot, they drove like, well, maybe they didn't, but like everybody like had to like peel out and like rev their engines. Like everybody was like letting the world know they're like, I just saw Fast and Furious. Like, um, so yeah, it's interesting to think that the Warriors being sort of this uh, fight machine, type of a movie, a gang violence movie, actually incited actual violence. Uh, but it doesn't always happen. Um, so, but for some movies, it does. Sometimes people they get too into the movie. I was working in a movie. I wasn't there the day of, but I did work for the movie theater at the time when somebody took the title "The Departed" a little too literally and actually died during The Departed. I shouldn't be laughing, but there was a one time where somebody like passed away in a movie theater, and of course it was in the movie The Departed. And that's a real story. I'm not making that up just for fun. Um, it's not even that funny, but uh, it's when you're matching the title, when you think about like what is the movie about or what's the title of the movie, and you're like, well, it's The Warriors, and then you're like, okay, it incites violence. The Departed. Um, it's uh, I guess but then there are like other movies like people didn't walk into queer and then everybody walked out gay, like that wasn't like, so who knows, I don't know what the effect of movies are on people, but it doesn't always just change people for uh for that. Um, I think Walter Hill made a movie that has stood the test of time for people who remember this film exists. I think for younger populations, they have to actually find it, and then you have to convince them to watch it because this film feels very 70s. So I don't think the average like random person is watching this without a lot of help. You know, I don't think there are people who are just like scrolling through a streaming service and they're like, "Oh, The Warriors." I think somebody's recommending it to them. They have a family member, they have like a dad. So, who knows? I don't know if we're going to be talking about The Warriors 10, 15, 20, 25. You know, I don't know when it peters out. But it has definitely had enough cultural references, and there are enough people alive who are fans of the Warriors and who still quote it to keep it going. And I thought the audio description was really good. It's actually a newer audio description. I don't know what year we added audio description to the Warriors, but it's definitely not old. It definitely sounds like it was made within the last 20 years, maybe 15 or 10. So somebody came along later and did it and decided the Warriors was important enough to have audio description on, which I agree. It feels like it's earned its place in cinema. I was kind of waiting to hear that like Department of Education thing at the end. I was like, is this Department of Education? Because that'd be hilarious. I love when it's like Department of Education and I'm not expecting it. And I'm like, what? This doesn't, this makes no sense. But yeah, check out The Warriors if you can. It's a film classic. It's also sometimes unfairly pegged as a grindhouse movie, which I feel like gives a certain notion of like what you're going to expect from it. And I don't think that that's fair. You know, I don't think that that's an actual correlation for this movie. It doesn't feel grindhouse to me. There are aspects of this, like the fact that Walter Hill exceeded his permits and kept filming anyway. There are parts of it that feel very, you know, I guess you could say groundhousey, but and using a cast of sort of unknowns and action violence sequences. But I don't think it fully qualifies as a grindhouse movie. So, but it feels very much 1979. I can tell you that. This feels like we're about to break into the 80s. You know what I'm saying? Like it feels like one of those films that we were starting to make. There are a lot of films like right before 2000 that deal with like the impending Y2K, you know, and like what's coming up. I don't know. We're about to start a new decade. Anything could happen. You know, a new millennium. Oh my God. You know, like it feels like one of those movies. So yeah, this feels like one of those movies that's saying, we don't know what the 80s could be like. Who knows? Maybe it's going to devolve into madness. Which we tend to sort of have more retrospective thoughts on at the end of a decade than we do on at the beginning. So I'm gonna give the Warriors an A minus. I think there probably are better movies out there technically, but I think this earns the right to be up there with them. So maybe just like right below it, not top, not A-list top tier, just right. It can still come along for the ride. So it's a lot of fun. It's actually not even that long of a movie, so check it out. Anyway, thanks for watching. Thanks for subscribing. I'll see you guys on the other side.